The first wave of Japanese planes has arrived and the war has come to Hawaii. Pearl Harbor is on fire. Battleship Arizona has exploded. Now at 8:10 a.m., President Roosevelt is told by Frank Knox over the phone that Pearl Harbor is under attack.
Thus, when the first group was beginning the bombing run again, we saw a huge explosion among the battleships on the eastern side of Ford Island. Roaring flames and dark smoke flared high, rising up to 500 meters. I intuitively judged it as an induced explosion. Soon the shock waves reached our formation, even though we were quite far away. The plane shook. Lieutenant Matsuzaki, who was at the controls, raised his head in surprise.
But the American ships are returning fire more and more. The tanker Neosho starts working its AA batteries. Neosho is in a real danger spot though, for she is docked right by the fuel depot and has just finished unloading aviation gasoline. If the now full tanks should be hit and blow, Maryland, Tennessee, and West Virginia will all become raging infernos. Any chance of California sailing is now shattered as well. The torpedo blasts have ruptured the fuel oil tanks forward, introducing water into the fuel system. And before the crew can clear it, the ship loses light and power. The flooding of the compartments close to the torpedo hits prevents access for any sort of damage control. Oklahoma is rolling over further and further. Since she has just undergone inspection, she is freshly painted, so doors, hatches, and bulkheads are open. And the 14-inch shells weighing 1,400 pounds each will roll when the ship does and crush anyone nearby to a gruesome death. When the attack began, General Quarters was called and crewmen went to man the AA batteries. But the reserve crew not assigned to batteries were to go to Deck 3, 2 decks below the main deck for safety. This makes sense for both a naval or an aerial battle at sea, but Oklahoma is at anchor being attacked by torpedoes from one side only. So the procedure becomes a death sentence for many sailors this day. There is true terror aboard the Oklahoma now as it rolls. The call to abandon ship is for many impossible with the rolling of the ship and the thousands of gallons of oil and water pouring on the decks, making climbing nearly impossible. At 8:12, Oklahoma capsizes. Electrical power was lost with the second torpedo hit, and inside the ship it is pitch black, except for where lucky crewmen managed to grab flashlights. Nearly 60 of Oklahoma's survivors managed to climb aboard Maryland to help work her anti-aircraft guns, but 461 of the ship's complement of 1,353 are now trapped in the darkness of the capsized ship, which is rapidly filling with water. Marine Private Ray Turpin regularly mans a secondary battery, a broadside gun not usually used for defense against air attack when at sea, and even less useful today since it's on the side of the ship not under attack. In the past 5 minutes, Turpin has been nearly killed 3 times, walked the starboard side of the ship as it rolled, saved 5 men from being killed by pulling them through a 15-inch porthole, escaped to the Maryland by climbing the mooring line holding them together, and then when it was cut while he was on it, swam over and climbed another line, and he is now working one of Maryland's anti-aircraft guns. Men are now frantically cutting Maryland free from the Oklahoma before Maryland, too, can be pulled over. Meanwhile, at 8:13, the mooring lines holding Utah snap, and she rolls over to port. Game over. West Virginia is on fire from the Arizona. She is taking on water and is now listing sharply, reaching 28 degrees. They have begun counterflooding, though, to try and stabilize the ship. As the attack unfolds, the phone lines go dead, and then the lights do as well. Shouts come to abandon ship. In the plotting room, well below the waterline, it is a grim scene. Victor Delano can see through an overhead hatch that Deck 3 is beginning to flood, and smoke is pouring in as well. The ship lists sharply, and everything on the plotting board slides across the room to the port bulkhead. Oily water begins coming in through the ventilation system. Delano leads his men towards Central Station, the West Virginia Damage Control Center. Before closing the watertight door behind him, he calls back to see if anyone is still there. Warrant electrician Charles Duval calls out to wait for him. Delano steps back into the plotting room, slips on some oil, and knocks Duval off his feet. They slide to the down end of the room and cannot get to their feet because oil is everywhere. They can't even crawl because they can't get any traction. They finally manage to pull themselves up using a row of knobs on the main battery switchboard. Once in Central Station Control Center, it is almost as bad. The lights do come on again for a while, but water is shooting in from cracks around the edges of the supposedly watertight door. Delano can hear the men trapped on the other side shouting. The damage control officer, Lieutenant Commander Harper, has to make the call. Let the men drown or open the door and risk everyone in the Central Station and indeed the whole ship itself. They do not open the door. Oklahoma rolls over past 90 degrees. Inside, the water keeps on rising, drowning more and more of the men. Japanese Ambassador Kishisaburo Nomura is supposed to meet Secretary of State Cordell Hull now in Washington and finally give Hull Prime Minister Hideki Tojo's message. He is late. They will now meet in 45 minutes, though. Nomura is late because decoding the 3 messages he got in the morning has taken longer than expected. The explosion a few minutes ago that broke Arizona's back flooded the forward compartments, blew many men to pieces, and burned many more to an agonizing death. Many others are still on fire right now, jumping over the side, hoping for cooling water to douse the flames, and finding burning oil instead. The ship is going down bow first, and many, many more are trapped in compartments and passageways below, and are now drowning, unable to escape the flood. The great majority of those aboard the Arizona who will live to tell the tale are those stationed aft, or those lucky few who climbed out a hatch and swam underwater past the surface oil and fire to safety. Arizona goes beneath the water now at 8:17 a.m. She has sunk in 9 minutes, but she is still leaking copious amounts of her 660,000 gallons of oil and has caused yet another new crisis. There is now no water pressure to fight fires from the shore. Arizona has sunk on the main water mains. Her tanks had been violently ruptured, and a monstrous fireball applied to the fuel oil. Sailors blown overboard who survived the explosion's power and had no choice but to struggle directly to the surface were confronted by a 6-inch thick scum of oil with rapidly spreading fire, their flesh potential matchsticks waiting to be ignited if the flames made lingering contact. Destroyer Helm, emerging from the channel, the first destroyer to do so, sights a conning tower and flashes the news that a sub is trying to penetrate the harbor. She increases speed and fires on what is another midget submarine, but does not appear to hit it. On the airfields, ground crews and pilots are frantically trying to find intact planes and get them airborne while still under fire from strafing Zeros. Gordon Sterling, not yet cleared for regular flight duty, is helping out, with pilots and armament crews to ready 4 P-36s that they've gotten out of the line of fire and into the arming embankments. The attacking Zeros run out of ammunition and fall away from Wheeler. The pilots, Lieutenant Lewis Sanders, Second Lieutenants Rasmussen in his pajamas, John Thacker, and Othniel Norris, speed up their preparations. Nearby at Schofield, Gordon's fiancée Peggy is saving babies.
Everybody was running. Somebody came down, I don't know who it was, and told the nurses to take all the babies in the baskets and take them to their mothers and tell them to take care of them.
The Oklahoma settles mast down. Hundreds of sailors are trapped alive inside the upside-down hull. The Japanese torpedo attack slackens somewhat. Tennessee is now engulfed in flame from the fires on and around West Virginia and Arizona. Horizontal bombers score 2 hits on Tennessee. One bomb carries away the after main yard before passing through the catapult on top of turret 3, breaking up as it partially penetrates the armored turret top. Large fragments of the bomb case do some damage inside the turret and put one of its 3 14-inch guns out of operation. Instead of exploding, the bomb filler ignites and burns, setting an intense fire which is quickly extinguished. The second bomb strikes the barrel of the center gun of turret 2, the forward high turret, and explodes. The gun is knocked out of action, and bomb fragments spray everywhere. Captain Mervyn Benyon of the West Virginia on his ship's bridge is mortally wounded from shrapnel from these explosions on his neighbor. It is an abdominal wound, so serious that his intestines are exposed. A piece of metal is passed right through his abdomen. Lieutenants Taylor and Welch have arrived at Halewa Airfield and are airborne in two P-40s with defective 50mm guns, but functioning 36mm guns. Commander Earl Stone, the executive officer of the California, returns to his ship from ashore and takes command. Enterprise's air squadron, remember Task Force 8? Have been attacked in the skies by Japanese planes while heading to Pearl Harbor. See, Enterprise was originally due back from Wake Island at 7:30 today, but heavy seas delayed refueling of their destroyers, so they're a ways off the coast. But the scouting squadron of 18 still took off and is now to land on Ford Island. About 20 minutes ago, Ensign Manuel Gonzalez yelled over the radio, "Don't shoot, I'm a friendly plane." No one ever sees him again, but the other scouting planes are arriving. Counterflooding on the starboard side of West Virginia has stabilized her and prevented her from rolling over. Captain Benyon is given this news as his chief pharmacist tries to make the dying man as comfortable as possible. You may be wondering what Admiral Kimmel has been doing during all of this. Half an hour ago, Commander Murphy was giving him the submarine news by phone, right? Well, they are still on the phone when the planes arrive and the attack begins. A yeoman bursts into Murphy's office with the news and he passes it on to Kimmel. The Admiral, who is at home, runs outside. His next-door neighbor's house has a clear view of Battleship Row. Kimmel stands in their yard with his neighbor's wife, Mrs. Earl, and watches the planes circle and bomb, circle and bomb. They can see the rising sun insignias on the plane's wings. Mrs. Earl sees Kimmel's face turn as white as his uniform as his ships are hit and destroyed. They see Arizona hit and hit hard. Gordon Prang will write, "History had already swept past Kimmel with the speed of a movie out of control, beyond human capability to see or comprehend." Kimmel's car arrives and he is at headquarters at 8:05, just as California is hit. The scene is one of utter chaos. Both torpedo and dive bombers are still in raging action. High above them, the horizontal bombers rain their payloads down. Zeros dart in and out. Kimmel watches the scene from the War Plans office with Vice Admiral Pai, his second in command, who only yesterday stated, "The Japanese will not go to war with the United States. We are too big, too powerful, too strong." Kimmel points out that they should not be together. One shot could kill them both and leave the fleet without a commander. Pai goes to the other end of the building. At 8:12, Kimmel sends out to Stark and to the whole Pacific Fleet. Hostilities with Japan commenced with air raid on Pearl Harbor. At 8:17, he tells Patrol Wing 2 to find the enemy ships. That is a tall order. Kimmel is standing with Communications Officer Maurice Kurtz when a bullet flies through the window and hits him in the chest. It is a .50 caliber machine gun bullet, but it is spent and just leaves a splotch on his uniform before falling to the floor. Kimmel says, "It would have been merciful if it had killed me." Now, it might be surprising that both Kimmel and General Short have been taken so completely off guard by the attack. But the final warning from Washington, the intercepted magic decoded message from Tojo, has not arrived because General Marshall, Army Chief of Staff, who also directed Short to focus on sabotage, has decided to send it via telegram, and it has not arrived yet. Taylor and Welch are now close to Wheeler to fight off the attack there, but with the attackers gone from there, they are redirected to Barbers Point. As for the Carrier Enterprise's patrol planes, one of them had headed over Oahu just past 8, and when he realized what was going on, he changed course and went out to sea towards the Enterprise, calling out the attack on the radio. He does not find his carrier, however. She has changed course and disappeared under total radio silence. Running out of fuel, the pilot changes course again, reaches Oahu, and crash lands. Zeros account for 4 more of the scouting planes. 2 of the 4 pilots survive. Friendly AA fire downs another, which crashes into the Pacific, but both men aboard survive. The other scouts make it to either Ford Island or Ava at various times around now or in the next 15 minutes. As for the 12 B-17s flying in today from California, They have been flying for 14 straight hours and are not flying in formation, so they don't arrive together. Even stripped down with no armor or weapons, some of them still barely make Oahu. One of them had actually drifted north and just before 8 was heading south again when he was overtaken by a dozen or more planes with red circles on them. They seemed to be escorting him, but when he waved his thanks, they ignored him and continued past him. Most of the others make it to Oahu without incident, only to come across chaos and carnage. Flying into Hickam Field and seeing the burning rows of planes might be somewhat jarring, but when they asked for landing instructions, a calm, flat voice gave wind direction, velocity, the runway on which to land, as though it were any other day. Occasionally, the voice observed without emotion that the field was under attack by unidentified enemy planes. When squad leader Landon's turn to land comes a few minutes later, the deadpan voice tells him to land from west to east and that there are 3 Japanese planes on his tail. He landed 6 minutes ago. His other planes have either landed here or are scattered around the island. I have not mentioned the Hawaiian Air Force yet, but they are here today. Hawaii is not a state. It is a territory, and its Air Force was established at Fort Shafter just over a year ago. In July this year, they moved to Hickam. At the beginning of the year, the HAF had just 117 mostly obsolete planes. By today, after just over a year of integrated command under Major General Frederick Martin, it is 231 planes with 754 officers and 6,006 enlisted men. And the operational groups are the 18th Bombardment Wing at Hickam and the 14th Pursuit Wing at Wheeler. Now, the first U.S. Army aerodrome on Oahu, Luke Field, opened in 1917 on Ford Island. When the Navy tried to squeeze out the Army from Ford in 1919, a bunch of young pilots cleared some ground near Schofield Barracks, called that field Luke also, but eventually it became Wheeler Field. Wheeler actually, surprisingly, has no real defenses of any sort against aerial attack. Colonel William Flood, who commands the field, says they have no anti-aircraft program except for some machine guns. He assumes the Army has AA that protects the field, and there are also no air raid shelters or anything like that. It's Brigadier General Henry Davidson who commands the fighters there, though, and at least half of his total planes have been knocked out of action or destroyed, including 30 of the new P-40s I mentioned. Several hundred men are killed or wounded, and the hangars and the barracks are savaged. At E.05 Field, 21 Zeros make pass after pass and damage or destroy half the planes parked in the open there. By now, dive bombers and Zeros have joined in, and E.05 loses in total 9 of 11 Wildcat fighters, 18 of 32 scout bombers, and 6 of 8 utility planes. The attackers do this at the cost of 1 dive bomber and 3 Zeros. Kaneohe Bay Air Station is where PBY Catalinas fly in and out of. There were 26 lined up in neat rows this morning, and 4 in the bay when the attacks began. They have been mercilessly savaged by repeated dive bombing runs, but those enemy planes flew off 12 minutes ago. Unfortunately for Kaneohe, 9 horizontal bombers are now on their way in. Gordon Prang writes, "In at dawn we slept." Almost from the moment of action, Americans referred to the period between the first and second attack waves as the lull, but it was merely a high plateau between mountain peaks of action, and on any other day would have seemed the most crowded minutes of their lives. Every installation on Oahu burst into activity. As the defenders prepared for the next blow, they were sure would come. Grimly determined and angry men cleared debris from runways, dispersed aircraft, set up machine guns and AA emplacements, patched up damaged but still airworthy planes. When the Japanese returned, they would find an enemy with more guns blazing. The destroyer Aylwin gets the order to get underway. One of her screws is damaged by a bomb, though, and the 4 men currently aboard are all only ensigns, whose combined experience at sea is slightly more than a year. They are pretty sure they cannot get the ship out of the harbor amidst the rain of bombs, but they are damn sure going to try. Colonel Larkin, who commands E.05 Field, is watching its destruction from under a truck. Most of his men are also pinned down. they have no AA guns or anything, and really are sitting ducks. But one man there is also trying like the ensigns. Yoshio Shiga raked Eva with his Zero fighter. He noticed a Marine standing beside a disabled plane and charged down, all guns blazing. The man refused to budge, kept firing back with his pistol. Shiga considers him the bravest American he's ever seen. Shiga is also impressed by a B-17 in the skies, shaking off a gang of Zeros and making it to Hickam safely. A new round of heavy bombers now moves in, and the attack intensifies. Another bomb narrowly misses the California on the port side forward, but still causes minor damage. 5-inch guns numbers 2 and 4 fire at the carrier bombers. The forward machine guns bring down one of the attackers. 2 minutes from now, the ship will claim another enemy plane. Although multiple ships, as well as men ashore, are blazing away at the Japanese simultaneously, so verifying just who shot who is at times difficult. Over Ava Airfield, Taylor and Welch intercept a dozen Japanese planes. The two engage them, and although one of Welch's guns jams, they shoot down one Val, a high-altitude bomber, each on the first pass. Taylor downs a dive bomber trying to escape out to sea. Welch's plane is hit from an incendiary bullet just behind his seat. His plane now smoking, he climbs into a cloud bank to check the damage. The smoke disperses, and he rejoins the fray and soon downs yet another enemy plane over the water. Taylor has damaged at least 2 more of them. Right about now, an aerial gunner at Bellows Field sees a single plane fly in from over the sea and open fire on the tent area, firing like 50 rounds. Bellows has only been a permanent military post since July. It's the Army's fighter base, and lies on the east side of Oahu, some 7 miles away from Pearl. Bellows has 6 047s and 2 049s that call it home, and a visiting squadron of P-40s. Hickam, though, has not yet notified Bellows about the Japanese attack, but they soon do. You'd think the attacking plane would be a pretty strong alert, but as Private McBriarty says, the bullets look and sound just like blanks, and the plane looks like an AT-6 trainer. He goes to church unworried, and the men go about their business, though the warning will give the colonel a bit of a heads up. Oil pouring from Arizona, West Virginia, Oklahoma, and California is spreading deadly fumes across the harbor. Oglala reports heavy flooding in her engine room and increasing list. They are sure that they are going to sink, but they must get clear of Helena before they can abandon ship. If they roll over onto Helena, they'll bring her down too. Dock 1010, where they are moored, is a tragic and pathetic sight, according to Argonne Captain Quinn. That is where some rescue operations are based, though. Many wounded and burned men crawled ashore there. Others came in small boats and ambulances by the dozen. The base force band organizes itself into a stretcher team, ferrying the wounded to Argonne in load after load. It is also from where officers and enlisted men try to get to their duty stations, so it is quite congested. Many don't wait for their launches and just dive into the water and swim away. At 8:33, the battleship Maryland is hit by 2 bombs dropped by Fushida himself.
Since I had ordered the 3rd plane to return, my attack group now consisted of 4 planes. We focused once again on the target, the Maryland, and the signal from the guide plane indicated ready for release. Breathless, gripping the bomb release, I waited for the moment to arrive. Bombs away! I pulled the bomb release, watched the bomb glide gently downwards, then I lay on the seat to watch the descent of the falling bomb from the lower window. 4 armor-piercing bombs were going down side by side. There is nothing so thrilling in the world than to see whether the bomb you have just dropped will hit its target. Before long, directly in front of the bombs, which were moving in a straight line, the Maryland came closer. The bombs became smaller and smaller, to the point that we would lose sight of them if we blinked. I stared, holding my breath. I felt a spine-tingling thrill. As soon as the bombs became pinheads, 2 white puffs of smoke shot up from the deck of the Maryland. 2 bombs have hit.
Interestingly enough, his target had been Nevada, but just before bomb release they ran into clouds and had to make another run. That time there was too much smoke, so they opted for the Maryland instead. There are other more or less minor issues for the Japanese today. Their local map is from 1933, and though it's been updated, it contains some big errors. The 1936 artist's rendering of the future Hickam Field has 8 pairs of hangars instead of the 5 that are actually there. The map shows gasoline storage, where the baseball field is, and the administration center, a prize target, is labeled Officers Club, so it is not even attacked today. This mistake arose because dances were held there while the permanent club was being built. Whatever the other successes of Japanese agents, apparently they weren't invited to dances at Hickam. At Kito Butai on the Akagi, Admiral Nagumo has been following the progress. 8:05, torpedoes successfully dropped. 8:10, 30 planes hit, 23 on fire. 8:16, large cruiser hit. Bulletins like that have been streaming in, and as they do, the men aboard shout with success. Yamamoto is back on his flagship Nagato at Kure. The reports reach him, and the room buzzes with excitement. He, however, reportedly does not change expression. And at Pearl Harbor, remarkably, the mood of some is not one of doom and gloom. There are men hawking ammo like it was vegetables at the foot of Ford Island. A canteen wagon blown up at 1010 Dock, just a few minutes ago, a tragic and pathetic sight, has the men from Helena jumping ashore to gather up ice cream and candy bars, and when gunners from Helena shoot down a plane, the captain shouts, "The Marine team scores a touchdown!" The oddest flotilla is at work around Ford Island. They've been dodging Japanese strafing runs and cruising in, through, and around the burning oil to rescue anyone still swimming. A bosun's mate pilots an admiral's barge. A musician who's never steered a boat before in his life now pilots one of the Argonne's launches. A honey barge, those are the ships that transport sewage and garbage, is fighting the fires on the West Virginia. There's even a semi-notorious water barge that apparently has a reputation for giving a ship more than its quota if they get something in return. The going rate for 10,000 gallons is a fully dressed turkey and 60 dozen eggs. Well, that was the rate yesterday for the tender Curtis, who had the turkey in the oven when the Japanese arrived. That was yesterday. Today, the barge is doing all it can to help the swimmers. On the West Virginia, the fires continue to rage. Victor Delano has returned to the bridge to find his captain dying. Delano gives Captain Bennion some ether and sits with him, assuring him that yes, the ship's guns are still firing. The captain has been given morphine for his pain, and he is fading. Something else is now fading as well. The heavy bombers keep dropping their loads at regular intervals, but the strafing has become only sporadic as the planes of the first wave of attackers are gradually being sent back towards their own ships, out of ammunition, elated at their accomplishment. The American losses are catastrophic. Well over 1,000 dead, all of the battleships damaged or destroyed, hardly an airplane intact, and it isn't even over yet, not by a long shot. On the Japanese side, out of the 183 planes they sent in this wave, they have lost 9 of them. 3 fighters, 1 bomber, and 5 torpedo bombers and their crews. Whatever else this wave of attacks is to the rest of the world, it is a ringing success for the Japanese. Aboard Akagi, Admiral Nagumo is seen to smile for supposedly the first time since Kito Butai left Hitokapu Bay November 26. Taylor and Welch, now out of ammunition, land at Wheeler. The Stagners have reached higher ground and see the carnage.
What we saw will never be forgotten. One battleship was upside down and others were ablaze and helpless. We knew that countless men were dying out there. It seemed as if the water was on fire with burning oil. Overhead, we saw a lone Japanese plane calmly make pass after pass, through clouds of black smoke rising from the disabled ships. Years later, Dad and I looked at the photos and wondered, had they been taken from that plane? We think so.
The tender Curtis, yep, the guys with the turkey in the oven, now signals a submarine sighting inside the harbor. The destroyer Monahan sees this and tries to ram the spotted sub while everyone else in the vicinity now also spots it and fires upon it. The destruction has been staggering, and yet the attack is just 45 minutes old. While he watches it unfold, Kimmel began to fear that he would have nothing left. For the first time in his career, he had failed, and spectacularly so. all of his assumptions were wrong, although he had copious company. The Imperial Navy could indeed sail thousands of miles and refuel repeatedly on the high seas. It would indeed take such a risk, however mindless. Japanese pilots were better than conventional wisdom suggested. Torpedoes could work in 45 feet of water. Nets were necessary. The attack violated Kimmel's every notion of what was militarily and strategically sensible. Yet the Japanese were here.